Hello, my name is Johnny Lorello, and I'm an anesthesiologist at Toronto Western Hospital within the Department of Anesthesiology and Pain Medicine at the University of Toronto. I would like to thank the IRS for the invitation and for providing me with a platform to engage in dialogue regarding a subject about which I am extremely passionate. I have no conflicts of interest. I will disclose that I am a fourth wave feminist and therefore value intersectionality and try to better understand relationships of power. I am also a critical post-structuralist, deconstructing gender and moving beyond the gender binary. I have my own subjectivities, social locations, and standpoints, and I do not speak to the lived experiences of people with other axes of subordination than my own. But these lived experiences are critical to the process. I am privileged and try to use my privilege to help others. Today, I hope to be able to demonstrate some of the evidence around gender disparities in anesthesiology rather than clinical disparities given the time constraints. And I provide suggestions on ways of dismantling systemic systems of oppression. Today's objectives include I shall provide you first with a few definitions and concepts. Diversity is the range of human differences used to describe a group of people, not a particular individual. Some can be obvious, some can be hidden, and some can be both. Diversity can extend beyond the diversity of people to include diversity of thought and ways of knowing. Inclusion is an outcome and can relate to power, voice, culture, and knowledges. Equity, on the other hand, is a process. Equity transcends policies, practices, as well as positions, just to name a few. There are differences between equity and equality. You can think of equality as providing everyone with the same support, irrespective from where they are starting off, thereby potentially not allowing each individual the opportunity to view the baseball game over the fence. The fence acts as a barrier. Equity, on the other hand, supplies each individual the required supports in order for each person to be able to view the game irrespective of the barrier. Liberation occurs when you remove the barriers and obstacles and are free to view the baseball game from your own standpoint. In reality, there are structural barriers that prevent us from succeeding. We can think about each human growing to the same height. The difference now is the depiction of structural forces distorting how people and groups of people are socially appraised. As you can see, one person is standing in a ditch and another person tied to the ground, both being oppressed, while another person stands on a block of privilege. Each one of us has our own individual palette. The interconnected nature of social constructs such as race, class, ability, sexuality, gender, religion, etc., as they apply to a given individual, can advantage or oppress people. It's important that whenever we talk about intersectionality, that we also discuss intersecting power relations and how they impact social relations across the spectrum. Sociologist Michael Kimmel uses the wind as a metaphor that I think can help you understand the concepts that I have just discussed. When you walk against the wind, you struggle for each step that you take. When you walk with the wind, you don't feel the wind and you move forward at a faster pace. If you're fortunate to walk with the wind, it propels you forward with little effort. This is the definition of social privilege. Much of the work done in anesthesiology thus far has revolved around gender, with a few studies looking at race, ethnicity, and sexual orientation. Let's start off by looking at applicants to residency programs. We looked at the representation of female applicants to the R1 match in the US between 2014 and 2019 using the AAMC data. The study population included just over 511,000 applicants to the R1 match, of which 47% were US medical graduates and 53% were international medical graduates. Out of the total number of applicants, 44% were female. Anesthesiology had a lower representation with respect to the applicant pool average, where 33% were female. We also looked at the representation of race and ethnicity. The majority identified as white or Asian. The lowest diversity was seen in orthopedic surgery, emergency medicine, obstetrics and gynecology, and anesthesiology. The highest diversity was seen in family medicine and psychiatry. We decided to also look within a Canadian context, and out of just over 48,000 applicants identified over 25 years, the overall percentage female was 54.5%. In anesthesiology, 40.8% of all applicants were female. We did not detect a significant increasing trend in the representation of female applicants in anesthesiology. When looking at the number of applicants and those matched in anesthesiology, there was no statistical difference in male or female applicant rejection. Females were more likely to be rejected from surgery, and males were more likely to be rejected from psychiatry and family medicine. Now let's focus on the representation of women in authorship. Out of all original research published in 2011 within the British Journal of Anesthesia, 30.3% of all first authors were female. Within anesthesiology and anesthesia and analgesia, we see that there is an increase in the representation of both first and senior female authors from 2002 to 2017. We also looked at authorship and found that 81% of authors within the Canadian Journal of Anesthesia were male. Although there was an increase in the proportion of female first authors over the years, the overall proportion was outpaced by the increasing number of working female anesthesiologists as determined by the Canadian Medical Association data. A retrospective analysis of articles reviewed at the Canadian Journal of Anesthesia revealed that 36% of first or corresponding authors were women, but only 18% of women provided external reviews. With respect to the editorial board of the Canadian Journal of Anesthesia, 10% were women, making up 6% of member positions. The trend has been on the uprise. Within the major pain journals, this study detected fewer overall pain physician women editors than men, with differences appreciated across different journals. However, the study also showed that the percentage of women editors matched the percentage of practicing women pain physicians. Let's now look at speaking opportunities at conferences. Between 2007 and 2019, 28.5% of Canadian Anesthesiologist Society annual meeting speakers were women. A total of 46% of all man panels, that is, MANLs, was identified. Women were most highly represented in the obstetric anesthesia and lowest within transplant anesthesia and ICU symposia. Between 2012 and 2019, 17.4% of speaker slots at the American Academy of Pain Medicine and the American Society of Regional Anesthesia and Pain Medicine were women, with a range of 1.1% to 42%. With regards to the ASRA meeting, there was an increase in the percent of women speakers from 13.1% to 42% from 2018 to 2019. The authors associate this increase to intentional actions such as removing MANLs. With regards to grand rounds, this study demonstrated that 23% of all invited external speakers were women. 85.2% of men invited speakers, of which 20.2% of these speakers were women. We also looked at the intersectional data of gender, race, ethnicity, and academic rank in anesthesiology. The majority of anesthesiologists were assistant professors and lecturers. Men who identified as white made up 43% of faculty overall. From all men anesthesiologists, those who identified as Asian were the second most highly represented amongst academic ranks. Let's now turn our focus to discrimination. An online cross-sectional survey posted on a virtual physician moms group looked at maternal discrimination, conceptualized as self-reported discrimination dealing with pregnancy, breastfeeding, and/or maternal leave. Anesthesiology was a specialty that experienced the greatest amount of maternal discrimination. The number of women experiencing maternal discrimination increased with each additional child. In this study, almost 60% of respondents stated that the 7 weeks median maternal leave was inadequate. The majority felt discouraged in taking any leave. Unfortunately, only 1/3 of programs had formal maternity leave policies. 92.7% of women breastfed children for 8 months. More than half of respondents felt discouraged to take any pump breaks. Despite an increase in breastfeeding, there were decreased spaces detected over time. We surveyed all anesthesiologists and anesthesia trainees across Canada. Women anesthesiologists experienced greater discrimination, made uncomfortable about their gender, and experienced greater barriers to career advancement. LGBTQ2S+ anesthesiologists experienced greater discrimination and were made uncomfortable about their sexuality. We must do better. We need to change. Albert Einstein defined insanity as doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. In order to effect change, organizations and people need to change. If you're going to tackle these problems and try to address them, first and foremost, you need to identify the problems, be clear of the problems, and understand what the current state is. Metrics are therefore an essential part of addressing one aspect of these disparities. We each have a unique path, and our own perceptions and experiences in the same environment can be very different. If you feel uncomfortable or defensive, stay curious. This process requires discomfort to challenge our deep-seated beliefs and biases. Academic anesthesiology requires an EDI lens at multiple entry points in order to tackle systemic, interpersonal, and personal discriminatory practices. We can all be allies and speak up against microaggressions and overt discrimination and racism. Some existing tools to help minimize bias include the University of Arizona Reference Letter Aid, bias interrupters, and cultural complications that take the form of morbidity and mortality rounds. We need to welcome and support parental and caregiver support. We need to take into account intersecting axes of subordination and the differential impact of and in all that we do. We need to pay attention to burnout and to the minority tax. We need to remunerate people appropriately and equitably for the work that they do. It is no longer enough to not be racist. We need to be anti-racist. We need to ensure that people in power do not weaponize professionalism when people call out discrimination and racism. We also need to help minimize barriers. The women anesthesiologists in our study articulated the need to surmount systemic barriers and biases that they encountered along their journey to leadership positions. Mentorship, sponsorship, and coaching helped surmount some of the obstacles that they faced. This talk is by no means all-encompassing, but I hope that I was able to shine some light on equities and inequities in anesthesiology in order to effect transformative social change. Some of you are leaders, some of you are leaders in progress, and others are still learning. If you're a leader, your job is to pull people up, recognizing that many experience different obstacles, having a stronger wind pushing against them. I thank you for your time and your engagement.